All right, we are back. This time I'm here with Chris. I'm so sorry for the confusion. I hope some of you can join us right now. If not, if you see us later, thank you so much for coming. Chris, do you mind giving a little bit of a recap of the last two chapters and then we can go ahead and start the book reading?
Yes, and I should probably give my own apologies for what happened earlier. I knew that I was going to be here at 2 o'clock Texas time. I then went on a website which told me what time it was in Texas, and it told me it was 1 p.m. So yeah, that's why we're an hour later because uh, yeah, when you go on websites which have the specific job of telling you what time it is, you expect them to just tell the truth. This one did not for some reason, so we're an hour late, and so I can only apologise for that. I was literally sitting down for dinner when I was suddenly told it's actually 2 p.m. over here. Oh, okay.
Hey, what did you have
Anyway,
for
so
dinner, by the way?
lasagna.
Oh, cool.
Mm. So okay, so in chapter 11, uh, Kate and Alex tried to escape the clone factory, which was quickly getting surrounded. Kate escaped. Alex did not. He is trapped in the control room, and we have no idea what's happened to him. Uh, we know he's been shot through the shoulder, and Kate was unable to protect him because she'd run out of ammunition that was compatible with her weapon. So she had to flee. We don't know what's happened to Alex. And in the meantime, Jack ventured back into the Citadel, got into a fight with Oliver Roth, and basically managed to escape with his life, which is a rare feat, by the way. The more you get to know Oliver Roth, the more you'll know exactly how much Jack kind of overperformed there. Anyway, so chapter 12, with them being all pinned down by clone soldiers and becoming progressively accepting the fact that, okay, well, I guess we're dead now. Kate had a very emotional phone call with McCormick and told him exactly what he'd always meant to her. And that was up until Ewan engineered an escape plan, which basically involved Oliver Roth firing a laser cannon at the inner city walls, uh, missing enough times to break a hole into the prison, and now they've just scrambled through the hole into the prison. And hello, Steph, who I understand has spent the last hour or so catching up on the chapters, so she's right up to date now and witnessing this at the same pace as everyone else. And hello, Jenny, and everyone else who's left a comment who I wasn't looking at. But yeah, thank you very much. It's always lovely to read in front of an audience. But the chapter 12 ended with, here we go, the control panel of Buffet. Hello. Control panel of the laser cannon displayed the all-important green LED, but Oliver Roth was too late to fire a third shot. Ewan and Kate, after Jack and Charlie, tumbled through the hole together and leapt headfirst into uncharted territory. Now, we thought that was a tense place to leave it back then, but chapter 13 is when, well, certain things hit the fan.
All
So,
right,
yes.
I think
Right,
Steph
so in a way,
lost a
Steph,
lot.
yeah, yeah, kind of glad that website lied to me now about what the time actually was in Texas. So, here we go. Chapter 13. Oh, yeah, fun fact. There are 28 chapters in this book, which means at the end of tonight's session, we'll be exactly halfway through.
Well, I'm
Chapter
kind of
13.
sad. Okay, well,
Yeah. Don't worry, there's another 3 books.
there's another 3 books, yes.
Yeah. Sunlight, so rarely seen during combat. It came over the southern wall and blasted Ewan's eyes, but he caught glimpses of the world's largest prison as he fell. His squinting eyes were met with a sea of corrugated iron roofs, half-rotted wooden beams and pillars of ugly concrete, like a favela but less habitable. Makeshift houses lined the approximate paths. Whole families must have been hosted in the doorless improvised shelters, so fragile that a strong enough wind could collapse them. But maybe wind didn't exist inside the citadel walls, given the unholy stench of decaying wood and stale urine. Ewan's body smacked against the smoothed out concrete of the citadel floor, and he was vaguely aware of Jack and Charlie helping him to his feet. Could have warned me about the drop, he muttered, choking for his words and through his words on the thickness of the air. I think I just discovered a typo in the book. No, no, I don't think it. Choking through his words on the thickness of the air. I think I can get away with that. I only
It's
discovered
okay,
that like
Chris.
4 years after the book
It's
came out.
okay.
No. Oh, it's not an error. Choking through his words is like choking on the thickness of the air, except choking through his words on the thickness of the air. Yes, okay, it is not a typo, so everything is fine. That's a relief. Anyway, could have warned me about the drop, he muttered, choking through his words on the thickness of the air. I thought floor Z will be at ground level. Ewan, go! Yelled Charlie. We're nowhere near safe yet. There were people around him. Other humans. Real humans. Everything about them, from their faces to the clothes on their back, looked in even worse condition than the underdogs, having had 0 chances in 11 months to wash themselves. They were retreating under their improvised roofs, shouting to their children with panicked Cockney accents. Ewan had almost forgotten what a Cockney accent sounded like. Stay together, shouted Jack. If we split up, we'll never find each other again. The underdogs surged into the dense inner-city jungle. Ewan led the charge down a path between 2 shacks, leaping over clusters of concrete and metal along the ground, and cutting his hand on a roll of barbed wire spread across somebody's wall. He glanced back at the hole his team had scrambled through. It looked to be about 5 meters off the ground. A band of clones had gathered behind it and raised their automatic weapons. Oi! Came a shout from an excitable woman to his left. Where the hell did you get those guns? She fell silent on either the first or second gunshot. Ewan could not tell which, but the bullets had been aimed at him. The last of the remaining onlookers screamed and scattered like a small fish from a predator. Ewan joined his team behind the strongest-looking construction and dived to the ground as the clones rattled bullets towards them. The wood in front of the shelter was ripped to shreds, and the screams inside quickly stopped. This is horrible, screamed Kate. We've got to fire back, snarled Charlie. At least give it a try. Charlie, don't you? He was too late. Charlie had thrown his head and pistol around the side of the house's remains, but Charlie did not fire, and nobody fired back. When Ewan checked why, he saw Oliver Roth and a band of clones gathered at the hole. They were tipping the laser cannon into a downward angle, pointing its gigantic barrel towards the shelter. Laser cannon! He screamed. All 4 underdogs left the blast radius moments before a circular wall of light roared through the inner city and shattered the remains of the shelter. Dust and wooden splinters filled the air, along with the screams of 1,000 civilians who had no idea why they were being fired upon. Can we run out of range in half a minute? Asked Charlie. The other end of New London won't be out of range, shouted Ewan. We have to get out of sight. Ewan accelerated again, questioning how much energy remained in his tarring body. The conflicting sensations of the inner city made him sick. The prisoner was expansive beyond imagination, but every square meter was cramped. He gave him claustrophobia and agoraphobia at the same time. I think in America you call it agoraphobia for some reason. He checked over his shoulder. The hole in the outer city wall was out of sight, hidden behind the walls and ceilings of the makeshift houses. Roth wouldn't hesitate to fire blindly on the prisoners, just on the off chance of getting us. But they're all safe. Roth won't have the patience to wait half a minute for each shot. Guys, inside! He heard Kate squealing from the front, with her arms stretched across the nearest collection of wood and iron. Ewan refused to think of it as a building. One of the walls had been a fence in its former life. Grant must have harvested materials from dead towns to drop to his subjects, then just left them to it. Ewan stood guard until Jack and Charlie made it inside, and only then did he notice the home's owner. He was storming in their direction with some kind of pointed object in his grip. Get away from here! He screamed, thrusting his arm towards the nearest invader. The fork in his hand missed Charlie's face by half an inch. Saggy-skinned with baggy clothes, as if he had once been obese, this man had no better weapons to defend himself. Ewan barged forward, readying himself for combat against a man he had entered this war to save. Somewhere outside, the air was humming. The laser cannon must have been close to firing. Oh, watch you break in! I've heard people die! The man screamed. Whatever you're doing here, you brought war with you! Ewan raised his assault rifle. It was enough to silence him. Guys, said Jack from a hole in the wall, the laser cannon's gone. Ewan did not check for himself. His eyes stayed on the man with the fork. Seriously? They've given up already? It's just clones now, shooting people as they climb for the hole. Ewan closed his eyes in disgust, but sprung them open again in case the man tried to attack. Those despairing prisoners must have known the futility of trying to escape. They were willing to face death for a 1 in a million chance of success. Normal Londoners, who once had homes and careers and livelihoods, were ending their time on Earth by firing squad. The clones won't have given up on us, Ewan muttered. They'll have chosen something else to hunt us with. Once he stopped talking, Ewan noticed the hum still in the air. It had not been the laser cannon after all. Seconds later, the hum had changed to a whir. When the whir changed to a chop, chop, chop audible through the roof, Ewan swore again. Podcopters, whispered Kate. Back when Ewan had wanted to follow his father into the army, he had seen countless videos of M134 miniguns spraying bullets. The sound could not be mistaken as the podcopter opened fire through the roof. The walls and ceilings exploded into shards. Ewan could only slam his hands over his ears, dive for a corner, and trust his friends to do the same. The podcopter randomized its fire like a toddler scribbling over paper. Ewan pressed his face to the concrete ground, the only stable part of a world that shook as if mid-earthquake. When the gunfire paused, Ewan gazed back to the middle of the room. The dead body of the homeowner lay in a growing puddle of his own blood, large chunks of his flesh separated from the rest of his corpse. "We're dead if we stay here," shouted Kate, above the sound of a wooden beam collapsing from the roof. Charlie shouted something in return, but nobody heard his words. Ewan peeked upwards and saw the podcopter, egg-shaped, dark green, big enough for a pilot and controls, but nothing else, and twice as close as he had predicted. He couldn't see through the tinted window glass, fitted in the shape of frowning, intimidating eyes, but the pilot inside was redirecting the miniguns towards Ewan's face. Ewan sprung to one side, and the podcopter let loose a second round of bullets that sent the rear wall tumbling onto him. Ewan's last sight before darkness was Charlie springing to his feet and charging through the exit away from the team. Ewan couldn't tell whether it was selfishness or heroism. It was probably the latter. Charlie must have known the gunfire would follow him. "Kate! Jack!" "I'm okay," Kate's voice sounded, dulled by the debris. "Where are the others?" Charlie legged it. "The copter's firing at him. I don't know about Jack." "Digging you out," Jack grunted. "You're welcome." Once Jack had lightened the pile of wood and concrete, Ewan forced his way out like a dusty zombie from its grave. Jack turned in the direction of Kate's voice, revealing blood all over the back of his head. It must have been the debris. The quadcopter was only 2 or 3 meters above, retraining its guns towards Charlie's new shelter. It was too high to jump up and grab, and its hull too strong for petty rifle bullets. There was another way, but it would be a massive risk. Then again, Ewan's last massive risk had saved 4 lives in that corridor. "I can do this," he muttered to himself with his face to the sky. Charlie is 3 days from his 16th birthday. He should live to see it. By the time the quadcopter released its first wave of bullets into Charlie's shelter, Ewan had hauled himself onto the low roof of a neighbouring house. He scrambled to his feet, took a careful glance. Second. How did I lose my place halfway through a sentence? Took a careful glance at the corrugated metal beneath him and began his run. The pilot was facing the other way and could not see Ewan as he charged along the rooftop and leapt from the edge. He thumped into the cold, hard back of the quadcopter, his head just half a meter below the spinning blades. His left foot was balanced precariously on a joint between the titanium shell and one of its miniguns. 3,000 bullets per minute, blades spinning rapidly enough to press his helmet deep into his scalp. The most agile and maneuverable helicopter ever devised. Everything about the machine screamed fast, and Ewan was faced with a massive sensory overload. He clung on for dear life as the quadcopter swung from the unexpected weight, his minigun still blazing but its aim less accurate. Ewan gritted his teeth, lifted his left foot, and stamped it down, dislodging what appeared to be a safety guard on the casing of the left-hand minigun, a guard which prevented the bullets from being aimed too high. He then pushed with all his body weight against the back end. The muzzle of the weapon flew upwards. 50 bullets per second screamed up into the sky and shattered the rotating blades above them. The air was filled with shrapnel. One of the giant shards zipped downwards and slashed its way down Ewan's left arm. With his brain paralyzed by noise, vertigo, and searing pain, Ewan's hands released their grip and he tumbled to the ground. The quadcopter fell like a boulder, landing on the concrete with a piercing clang. Ewan, too dizzy to stand, bent his weary head towards his shrapnel wound. The metal had glided through his skin with zero difficulty. Lorraine would have a hell of a lot of stitches to perform, if he ever made it home. The door on the quadcopter fell open against the concrete to reveal an angered, shaking hand. Ewan had landed in front of Charlie's shelter, and a thump against the collapsed roof revealed that his friend was still alive. The pilot stumbled out of the capsized cockpit, fumbling a pistol into his hands. Disoriented, confused, and consumed by his own fury, he was unprepared for the girl approaching from behind. Kate, unarmed since entering the inner city, marched over the rubble with the dead man's fork clutched in her hand. When the clone turned in surprise, she planted it firmly into his neck. Her other hand grabbed the pistol from the clone's loosening fingers, tugged it free, and shot him dead. Charlie emerged from the ruins of his shelter, coughing the debris dust from his lungs. You okay, mate? He asked, pointing to Ewan's blood-soaked arm. Me? What about you after your suicide charge? Kate? Charlie asked, distracted again. Ewan turned around. The colour was gone from her face, and the pistol in her hands dropped to the ground. We don't get to choose when anxiety strikes, or why, Ewan thought, but stabbing a clone in the neck with a fork is a pretty good reason. Behind her, Jack leaned against the podcopter and applied all his strength to one of its miniguns. Guys, he said, help me break this off. The other's destroyed, but we can still use this one. Charlie ran for the destroyed podcopter. Kate didn't move. Ewan ran to her and returned the closed pistol to her hand, keeping a close eye on the locals. At that moment, he barely trusted the prisoners more than the clones. Overhead, something else started to hum. Oh, bloody hell, he snarled. Guys, we need to hide, now. Ewan gazed at the slash on his arm that was painting his hand red. There'll be no chance of repeating his trick with another podcopter. You lot, came a distant shout. Here! Ewan turned towards the voice. It came from a short, thin man in an aging shirt and the remains of a pair of jeans, outside a shack that lay within sprinting distance. One of his hands pointed towards his own entrance. There was nothing to lose. Ewan called his friends and ran for safety. He ran to escape more than the gunfire. He ran to escape the mental images of his last 5 minutes, images that would never, ever fade once they had solidified in his head. The woman next to the wall who had asked about their guns, the screams that had fallen silent in that first house, the prisoners who had tried climbing the ladder, the man with the fork. If we'd died in the corridor, all those people would still be alive. Well, for a while at least. We'd better end up winning this war. It's the only way to make this worth it. Thank you, Ewan gasped on arrival, as the gentleman ushered him inside with a hurried pat on the back. Your friends had better hurry. As Charlie, Kate and Jack passed through the front door, a detached minigun shared between their arms, Ewan tried to phrase the question in his head. Thankfully, the man already knew what he was thinking. Because Grant's people are after you, he answered. I really can't think of a better reason to trust someone. End of chapter 13.
Okay, well, that was a lot. It's
Well,
I almost thought that
I
Kate had died, and but
in book one.
I'm sorry, you were saying something.
Yeah, I think we both spoke over each other then, so I have to admit I missed what you said as well. I said that's action-wise, that's probably my favourite chapter in book one. I'm not sure it's my favourite chapter overall, but action-wise, it's probably the most intense.
Yeah, I almost wish after this chapter that they take a little breather from all of this and go back to McCormick and then come back after a couple of days. I feel like it's too much for
Funny
all
you
of
should
them.
say that. Chapter 14 is back at Spitfire's Rise.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'm glad I apparently got the pacing right.
You did. Okay, so
Cool.
anyone who's listening, if you guys have any comments about chapter 13, please feel free to write. Rofe says it's intense, which it was,
Thank you.
yes. And then let's move on to chapter 14. And if they have any comments, I'll stop you in between, Chris, and then we can address those comments then.
Okay. Right. Deep breath. And a sip of water.
Hey, before we start, I was wondering if we could tell everyone about your new book and the Kickstarter and
Yeah.
all that. That would be great.
Thank you for reminding me. Yes. So I'm not sure whether I have the power to write it in the chat, but if you have a link to the Kickstarter page, you're welcome to post that. Basically, I've put together a book with 150 autistic people from 22 different countries around the world. Some are children, some are teenagers, some are adults, and they're all telling the reader what they love most about life. The book is literally called What Do You Love Most About Life? And it's a positive anthology of celebrating autistic brains. And yeah, it launched on Kickstarter 2 days ago. It is already, well, the last time I checked, 57% of the way towards its target, which is pretty much unheard of, really, from in my experience of promoting my books. And yeah, Steph is one of the 150. Very, very happy to have her insights as well. And yeah, when it comes out, I hope you love the what my designer Nancy has done with your page. So Yeah, it's I don't obviously I don't have a copy with me now because it doesn't exist yet, but a previous version of it made in thank you very much made in 2016 has this is basically a rough idea of what it's going to look like. The version back then only involved children and teenagers. This one has autistic adults as well, but they're all answering the question, "What do you love most about life?" And the way I see it going is, well, I imagine it'll be helpful to A, autistic people who feel alone or isolated, or B, autistic children coming to terms with a diagnosis, C, families who want to understand the autistic brain better, D, anyone just curious about how the autistic brain works, and E, anyone who's interested in 150 reasons why life is awesome. Yeah, it's behind that link there. There's a video in it which explains well, but basically what I've just said and more. It's basically a shamelessly positive anthology of autistic people um, being all happy and uplifting all over the place.
Love it. I can't wait for the book to come. Precisely because of my little star being in the book too. So
Yep.
I can't wait for it to come. All right, then let's go to chapter 14. But I'll ask you after chapter 14 a question about your next book as well, the one about Oscar. So we'll discuss that after
Of
chapter 14.
course, Oscar Smith Speedcuber. Oh yeah, that's going to be good as well. In the meantime, a comparatively link is broken.
Hold on, let
Hmm,
me see.
let me see as well because I'm curious.
Stuff, it's working.
Okay.
I don't know why. It's working at my end. I am thinking, did I paste the entire?
It's oh, I see what I see what's happened. Um, you may have pasted a link which ended in a dot dot dot, like a shortened version of it. Um,
I just
in
pasted
fact, you
the
know
large.
what?
Yeah, I just pasted
Now,
the version. It should work now.
okay. Ah, yes, that is it. That is the exact link.
I'm so
Okay,
sorry.
and and yeah, it's now gone up a little bit since last check. So yeah, people are pre-ordering like literally right now. It's amazing. Okay, so we should probably better read chapter 14 at some point. Right, let's get to it. Chapter 14.
Yes.
Raj could read chessboards far better than books, but he was still losing. The moves just weren't coming to him. Normally, his brain could see straight through to the root of any problem. Amongst all the famous disadvantages of dyslexia, he had been blessed with the ability to see past all the frilly, unnecessary bits of a dilemma and see problems for what they really were. Not all dyslexic people were chess wizards, but problem solving, pattern spotting, and thinking in shapes came naturally to Raj. Except he was up against Mark. The icy 18-year-old giant in front of him had a few advantages of his own: a 3-year age bonus, an aggressive approach to basically everything, and a cool, calculating brain. No learning difficulties, no diagnosable conditions. How exactly did he get into Oakenfold? Raj stared at the board where the hand rested on his jaw, nursing the lump that Shannon had given him that morning. Wow, she could throw a punch. And wow, Lorraine could yell. You may remember this being quite a few months ago now. Raj did his usual thing, trying to investigate things possibly beyond what he really should be doing. And in his investigations, trying to work out who Shannon is and where she came from, uh, he looks through a bunch of her clothes to try and see if there are any more clues, like the printed pieces of paper that have fallen out back in chapter 2. Shannon caught him doing it and knocked him out. And that's the last we saw of Raj. Raj thought nurses were supposed to be gentle and caring, but Lorraine had hardly been sympathetic when he had woken up. Her voice had given him a bigger headache than Shannon's fist. The moral of the story was probably not to look through a girl's clothes, even for valid investigation reasons. Raj returned his attention to the game. He had run out of attacking options, and Mark's extra pawn was in danger of reaching the end of the board. Would you like a draw? Asked Raj. Would you like to shut your pie hole? Thomas gave a high-pitched laugh from the sofa. Clearly the boy thought Mark was joking. Mark made his closed fists visible at the edge of the table, and Raj knew what that meant. It wasn't to threaten him with physical violence. Mark wouldn't see it as worth his time or energy, but simply to remind him where the power lay. Raj placed his bishop on the long diagonal to guard the queening square. Cheers, said Mark, sending his rook straight to the end of the board and taking out Raj's last remaining knight. I forgot about that. He made me nervous, and it completely slipped my mind. Raj couldn't help but respect that about Mark. He knew the value of winning battles by removing the opponent's confidence. Before Raj could assess his options, loud footsteps came from the cellar stairs. He stared towards the door with an eyebrow perked. It couldn't have been Gracie, who was upstairs sleeping off a bout of laziness, or Lorraine from the farm, who was too slow for the speed of the footsteps. It might have been Shannon, but only if Lorraine had let her out of her sight. When Silent Simon burst through the living room door, Raj knew that it was time to forget about the chess game. Simon stood at the side of the board with a sheet of paper quivering in his hands, mouthing a word that was probably Lorraine. Give me that, said Mark coldly, reaching for the paper. Simon mouthed Lorraine again, but surrendered the paper as commanded. When Mark read the note, he frowned, even more than his default expression. Thomas, he said, get out. The child didn't try to negotiate like he did with everyone else. He knew Mark better than that. Raj watched him leave the room, passing Shannon on the way out. She must have followed the loud footsteps to see if anything was wrong. When Thomas was gone, Mark read the note aloud. Dear Lorraine, I'm sorry to report this bad news with paper, but you deserve to know quickly. Contact has been lost with all 5 of our friends. They had to go into New London to find Tyler's belongings, and Ewan found a USB stick in his backpack. But Kate's last call told me that Alex is most likely dead, and the other 4 were trapped in the corridors with a zero chance of escape. Oh, bloody hell, God, please not them. Not the best fighters we have, and not Kate. The war's pretty much over if they're dead. I'd like you to break the news very gently to the others, Mark finished. And don't tell Shannon. She needs to feel safe. Mark threw the paper back to Simon, and he turned to the young woman at the door. So, yeah, sorry about that. Shannon turned and ran, her face streaming with tears. Raj did not have the motivation to follow until he heard a child's voice shouting, Shannon, wait! And rapid footsteps following her into the cellar. Suppose I'd better watch over him, for all the good it will do. Raj left the chessboard, and Mark took the time to push his opponent's king over before following. By the time Raj was halfway down the steps, Thomas had placed himself firmly between Shannon and the exit Spitfire's rise, his arms and legs spread across the improvised door. Shannon reacted like a caged animal with a supermarket full of weapons within arm's reach. She ignored the unloaded guns and seized the nearest hunting knife. Unbelievably, Thomas didn't move. The blade, pointed in his direction, quivered in Shannon's hand as if it had already been thrown. She's killed a human before, Thomas. Raj's breath held itself in his throat. He and Mark were only part way down the cellar steps. Easy for Shannon to spot if she turned around, even in the cellar's natural darkness. But Raj wasn't worried about whether Shannon would come for them. He had spent enough time around single-minded people to know how committed they could be when they only had single objectives. And only one thing stood in the way of Shannon's. Please, came the boy's voice, bleating like a sheep. Please, just listen. If Thomas gets stabbed, Lorraine won't be able to save him. I can't just stand here. He's not ready for heaven yet. Don't even think about it, Mark whispered from the step behind him, as much as he was capable of listening. If she gets pinned on 2 sides, she'll panic and stab her way out. Raj closed his eyes. He was not ready to accept his own helplessness any more than he could accept the deaths of Kate and the others. But Mark was right, and he knew it. Everything Raj knew about combat strategy, hand-to-hand fighting, and people in general told him that there was nothing he could do. The last free child in Great Britain stood at knife point, threatened by an adolescent girl who could kill him in the belief that she was defending herself. I don't know what's worrying you, Thomas said, but everyone cares for you here. Outside there's nothing. Here you can have everything you could want. Shannon's unarmed hand swiped out and anchored itself onto the side of Thomas's head. Before the child could react, he had been thrown aside, and he yelped as his spine rammed against the memorial wall. Raj winced as Thomas's eyes squeezed closed, and his mouth locked open in pain. The boy spent a helpless moment regathering his senses before a metal blade rested against his throat. Give up, Thomas. Let her go. And for once in your life, shut up. Can I please say one thing before you leave? Thomas asked, the larynx of his throat rising and falling over the blade. Raj gritted his teeth. Shannon secured her grip on the knife. To that moment, she had begun to relax her fingers and concentrate on the exit. She made eye contact with Thomas, penetrative, frightening eye contact, and waited. Just give us a little more time, said Thomas. If you stay and don't like it, you can always leave later. But if you leave now, you'll never know what you missed out on. Shannon froze in place, her hands fixed around the door handle. The knife remained next to Thomas's throat, but at least it wasn't moving. Shannon, the boy asked, what are you afraid of? There was a flash of anger in her eyes, and she moved her face to within an inch of Thomas's nose. Then she spoke. I'll tell you what I'm afraid of, Sunshine, she snarled. Nicholas bloody Grant. 1 million clone soldiers, grown in factories by Nathaniel Pierce, trained for battle by Ian Marshall, and a 14-year-old psychopath creeping through the walls and slaughtering your friends. Oh yeah, and Thomas's mum as well, although Shannon doesn't know that. You do, because it was mentioned in a previous chapter, but Beth was shot to death by Oliver Roth a few weeks after Christmas. But I digress. Raj could feel Mark's angered breath on the back of his neck. The hatred in Mark's heart seemed to beat in time with Shannon's, but hers was even more powerful. And then last night, being marched by Keith to the last place on earth I'd volunteer to go, killing his clones before they could fire a shot, killing him in that garden. Even the countryside isn't safe. Shannon's words ended, although Raj couldn't tell whether she had finished her sentence or just run out of words. And you want to leave anyway? Asked Thomas. Shannon paused. Her grip on the door lost its tightness. Look at this, finished Thomas, tapping the stone slab behind him. That's our memorial wall. Most of our friends died outside. Nice work, thought Raj, saying the word most as quietly as possible. She doesn't need to know about Roy's cancer or Mike's suicide, or 13-year-old Callum running out of insulin a week after we got here. Shannon paused again. Raj was unsure how long the pause was, but if his heartbeats were anything to go by, it must have been half a minute. Then she took a step backwards and stabbed the hunting knife into the door. She threw a fist at one of the shelves, toppling it over and spilling handguns across the floor. She marched across the cellar, her evacuation plan cancelled, and burst through the tunnel towards the farm. When she had vanished from sight, Thomas looked straight towards Raj and gave him a toothy grin. Bright eyes, nice words, best intentions, succeeding anyway. Thomas Foster may have been the most incredible child Raj had ever met. That settles it, said Mark. We're going. Huh? Asked Raj, as Mark pushed past him into the armory and reached for the shotgun. Going where? Lambourne's Health Centre, as in the pinpoint on the map from several chapters ago. Right now. Simon, unlock the ammo cupboard, bring a load of bullets and wake up Gracie. Then give you a little note to Lorraine and meet us back here. Raj had not even noticed Simon standing behind him. On Mark's command, he turned and ran. Mark, I don't think... Thomas, Mark continues as if Raj hadn't spoken. Run to comms. Tell McCormick we're raiding Lieutenant Lambourne's headquarters, the place Tyler was taking Shannon. Thomas's smile dropped, and he looked to the floor, puzzled. Raj recognised the boy's expression. It came from the panic that all children felt when their teacher told them to do one thing, but the school bully told them to do another. But I'm not allowed to go outside. You can in emergencies, and this is one. You're a big lad now, and McCormick needs to know we're heading out. Besides, he's got big news to tell you about the strike team. Go. The boy vanished through the makeshift door and began a journey he had never made before. He knew the route to the Boys' Brigade Hall in case of emergencies, but had never followed the directions himself, and certainly not alone. McCormick's going to have Mark's head. You're right, Raj? Mark asked, with a voice that dared him to complain. Why the health centre? Because you just heard Shannon calling it the last place on earth she'd volunteered to go. I want to know what's there. Simon returned down the stairs with a big sack of ammunition, with Gracie 3 steps behind. What's going on? She asked with a yawn, approximately dressed. Raj found it weird, seeing her tired enough to not yet be in chameleon mode. She hadn't been awake long enough to put the mask of her additional personalities on. In the corner of Raj's eye, he saw Simon making his way through the door to the farm, note in hand. I'll explain on the way, said Mark, but we're raiding that health centre, now. This is wrong, thought Raj as he reached for his weapons. Not without McCormick's blessing. Not without Ewan. I guess Mark's the closest person we have left to a leader now. Wait, is this Mark already staking a claim to leadership now Ewan's out of his way? Raj shuddered. He didn't know for sure that his friends were dead, but he had already begun to accept it. After years of having faith in the unseen, his instincts drifted towards bitter life experience, that all too often people simply walked out that door and never came home. To his left, Gracie vanished into the generator room with a set of combat clothes to change into. But why now? Asked Raj. Why not wait and do it properly later? The war's lost, Raj, Mark said, stuffing his pocket with shotgun shells. Raj couldn't find an answer. Mark continued. You didn't think it would happen someday? This war was only ever about waiting, but I'm going to slit Lamborn's throat before it ends. Whoever he is, whatever he's done, he caused this. Him and Tyler. If it weren't for them, Shannon wouldn't have sweet-talked the guys into heading into their deaths. Raj bent to the floor and picked up two of the handguns, then rummaged through the ammo sack for the right kind of bullets. What about Shannon? He whispered. Why do you care? She knocked you out for perving through her clothes. Is she safe? What, from me? If she needs a bullet, I'll do it when we get back. For now, she might still be a good guy. Gracie reappeared, dressed for combat and adjusting a helmet to keep her hair neat. Even chameleons cared about their appearance. You've got lots of weapons, Mark, she said, her voice still in just got out of bed mode. I'm carrying Simon's too. I get the feeling he won't have much prep time. Sure enough, when Simon walked back out the cellar, he was followed by Lorraine. She was about as unhinged as Raj had expected, having just read the note for herself. What the hell do you think you're doing? She barked. Go to the health centre, answered Mark. Thomas has gone to tell McCormick. You sent Thomas to comms by himself? Simon, come. Mark, you'll bloody well answer me. Be grateful, Mark said. It was either that or leave him alone with you and Shannon. She threatened him with a knife, you know, while you left her unsupervised. Lorraine Shepherd, the matriarch of Spitfire's Rise, had no words. He knows she's feeling weak, Raj thought, so he's kicking her while she's down. The more helpless she feels, the less she can object to us leaving. 11 months earlier, Mark had used his brutal but natural authority to command the Oakenfold students to abandon their most vulnerable schoolmates. He was performing the same trick again, making a decision on everyone's behalf and making them feel like they weren't allowed to disagree. Mark opened the door. Gracie went through without question, and Raj followed with as much reluctance in his face as he could manage. The tunnel to the outside world was darker and damper than he remembered. It had been a while since he had left Spitfire's Rise. Simon, now. This isn't right. We should stand in front of the memorial wall before we go. We have to say united by our differences and everything else. Simon ran into the tunnel, and Mark closed the exit before Lorraine could regain her composure and protest. It's not right to abandon Lorraine with Shannon, or send Thomas to comms by itself. It's not right that Kate and the others are probably dead. None of this is right. End of chapter 14. We're now halfway through the book.
I'm actually going to the list and I'm seeing if I can find anything about Mark and see why was he in Oakenfold. So
it's kind of unspecified. His diagnoses are very unclear,
yeah.
But he spent a year in a youth offenders institution for reasons which you haven't learned yet, but you will.
Okay. Well,
I think it was largely placed there for behavioural reasons, and
I'm actually feeling
I know he doesn't really show much sign of trauma, but inevitably he will have lots of trauma, whether or not he allows other people to see it, based on his previous experience, which I think you're a few chapters away from learning about.
He's putting everyone in danger like this. He's not making a rational decision at this time.
Well, in his mind, they've already lost the war. I mean, if Ewan and Kate and Jack and Charlie and Alex are all dead, then that leaves 8 of them, one of whom is Shannon, one of whom is Thomas, one of whom is Lorraine, one of whom is McCormick. Basically, they've lost. So at the very least, he's going to find out what it was that made them lose. He's going to go to Lieutenant Lamborn's headquarters and find what the hell it was all about in the first place.
Okay, well, Chris, we do have plenty of time. Do you want to do chapter 15?
Would you like to hear chapter 15?
I mean, I can't stop here. I don't know. I don't know about...
I will leave it to a vote.
Okay, all right. Staff Rofe, I know both of them are here. Jenny, if you're still here, let us know if you guys want us to continue chapter 15. If not, I'll probably read it ahead of time before our next session. But
I'll say you're going to ask about Oscar Smith's Speed Cube, weren't you?
Yes.
So we talk about that, and at the end of that, if people want me to read chapter 15, I shall read chapter 15.
Yay!
Okay, that's 2 people saying carry on already. But right.
Chapter 15 it is.
Okay. You want to ask about the cubing book now, or do you want chapter
I
15
do,
now?
but I
I don't
think
mind.
we should conclude with that so that way we can give um,
That's a
kind
good
of
point.
like links and all of
Okay.
that associated with it, if any. So,
Okay. Well, after the tension of New London, inner city New London in chapter 13, we went back to Spitfire's Rise. And after the intense ending of Dan Spitfire's Rise, we're now going back to inner city New London. It's almost like you can't catch a break to relax, which is, to be fair, exactly what I'd hoped for. So the thing is, reading through this, Underdogs 1 is, in my opinion, the least good of the four books. I got better as an author as they went on, in my opinions. And also, by the time book 2 comes around, you already know the characters, so I don't have to spend ages introducing them. You can go straight into the action. And so, but reading through this, I actually like it a lot more than I remember liking it. So I'm happy.
well, I
So
love it, especially these two
thank you.
chapters. They actually gave me palpitations. So
Are you okay?
I am, yes, I am okay, but it's
Okay.
kind of like it's not. Mark's reaction just completely threw me off. I was like, what is he doing? Like he's not in his senses right now. But then, yeah,
Yeah, well, he would say that he is. He's saying he's doing something completely logical if there's completely nothing to lose. And Raj suspects that he's trying to already already stake his claim to leadership. Now he believes that Ewan's out of the way. And Steph's saying you'd like to write the damn thing. You'd be surprised how often writers don't actually like their stuff. But to be fair, I am very proud of this story. It's just I'm editing Uprising right now, the final Underdogs book, and it's intense. I utterly love it. But I spent so much time on that, I've forgotten that actually Underdogs 1 was not much less intense. Hello, Asa.
hi, sir.
Okay. All right, so chapter 15.
Okay, let's move on. No
Listeners.
spoilers.
Oh, no. Other than the finale is the most intense part of the series, which I don't think counts as a spoiler, I'm saying nothing about Uprising.
But you did
We don't even know anything about
unintentionally
Tooth and
give
Nail or
me a
Acceleration
spoiler.
yet. Here we
You
go.
did give me a spoiler, Chris. You said that.
Listeners.
Go
It
ahead.
was the emotion you and resent. Sorry, what was that?
No, I was just saying you did give me a spoiler. You said that, now that we already know the characters, so it would be easier to get right into the action in the next book. So that tells me most of them are going to be alive. So I'm kind of like happy about that.
Um,
Don't give me that look.
not
No.
necessarily. It tells you that the characters who are alive in book 2 are ones that you know.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay,
Let's move on. Don't tell me anything about it.
okie dokie. Chapter 15. Helplessness. It was the emotion Ewan resented above all others. Not anger or despair or bereavement. The inability to control situations or the people in them was the one feeling that made him feel subhuman. He had felt it a lot throughout the war, especially when people died. He had not been able to save Rachel Watts from the car crash 2 months earlier, when fleeing by vehicle had been their only option, or Daniel Mopoulos 3 weeks ago, when he had went missing partway through that raid, or Alex. Now he was in New London's inner city, and he had never felt so helpless in his whole life. I'm going to spend a lot of time in here fighting against my own brain. He flinched as Charlie's hand landed on his shoulder. Mate, Charlie said, it's been half an hour. If they were going to send something else, they'd have done it by now. Come and sit down. Ewan tore his eyes from the shelter's entrance. He had avoided human contact by pretending he was afraid of another podcopter strike, and had ignored Kate's every word as she addressed his wound with a bandage from the rucksack. He couldn't think of a worse moment to socialise with new people, and had no idea how Kate, Jack, and Charlie had managed to hold a conversation behind him. Just like Ewan, they had all grown up being told that they weren't good with people. Mate, yeah, Charlie, fine. Ewan took a deep breath and left his post. As he turned, he was surprised at how much floor space a short gentleman in his 50s had managed to claim for himself. The concrete ground within the shack must have stretched for 4 meters long and 6 meters wide, hosting separate piles of clothes that must have represented beds, and a raised wooden beam that served as a table. The other underdogs were sat around it, next to 3 extra faces, which explained why the house was so large. Sorry, Ewan said to the family with his face to the floor. I must have looked really rude. Don't worry about it, the gentleman interrupted, stretching out a wrinkled hand. Patrick Rowland. Handshakes were another part of life that Ewan had forgotten. His last handshake must have been with his dad at the end of his first day at Oakenfold. He approached slowly, like a wild animal tempted to eat from a human's fingers. Ewan. Ewan West. He decided to trust Patrick with physical contact and unclenched his fist. The two shook hands and made their way to the wooden beam, where the home's occupants were sat across the concrete floor. Among the strangers were a grey-haired lady and two adult sons with matching physiques and bold dark hair. My wife Ruth, said Patrick, and my lads, Aidan and Benjamin. Hi guys, Jack Hopper, Kate Arrowsmith. We've done that bit already, said Jack with a smile. Oh. Ewan's friends must have reached the same conclusion, that Nicholas Grant already knew their names and details, so there's little point keeping secrets from their protectors. So, who are you? Ewan began. Other than your names, I mean. What did you do back in... Bloody hell, talking to regular people is difficult. Must be out of practice. Us? We ran a bed and breakfast in Croydon, began Patrick with a nostalgic smile, and Benjamin became a lawyer in Twickenham. Aidan, our eldest here, got his architecture degree in Bristol and stayed there. Aidan cracked a conflicted smile. I was visiting for Dad's birthday when the soldiers came, he said. Maybe I was fortunate. Grant had one of these places near Bristol. He used to drive past it on the way to work, wondering what it was. I guess it would have been kept in there. Young was surprised to see the Rowlands smiling. Despite their endless chances to be split up, both outside and inside New London, they had remained a surviving close-knit family. Patrick, Ruth, Aidan and Benjamin. Perfect examples of bold British resilience. But the dream was to move up north, said Ruth, to Yorkshire somewhere. The weather's awful, but the people are so lovely. I wanted to open a fish and chip shop in Whitby. Yeah, said Aidan with a laugh, somewhere between the other 100. Oh yeah, most people watching are Americans. Whitby is this lovely seaside town up in Yorkshire. Everyone loves it. The other 100 did just fine, and we would have done as well. But either way, it looks like the boys did better than us. An architect and a lawyer. Just fancy that. She glanced across at each of her sons with a warm smile. Ewan hated boasters, but was willing to tolerate Ruth's pride. There couldn't have been much to show off about inside the inner city. In retrospect, though, said Benjamin, I wish I'd done something that involved practical skills. Fat lot of good lawyers are to anyone now. Anyway, I think we've been polite long enough. Benjamin rested both of his elbows on the wooden beam and leaned forwards, perhaps trying to look imposing. Good luck with that, you overeducated smart-ass. I'm the one with kills to my name. If you're staying here, Benjamin continued, we need to know where you've come from and what kind of risk you pose to us. The youngest son received disapproving looks from his family, but Ewan understood. He was actually surprised that the Rowlands had gone for so long without asking. All right, Benjamin, let's not be rude. I'm 26, Mum. You can call me Ben. They come here armed to the teeth, a load of people die along the way, and Charlie says they fought a guerrilla-style war against Grant. From outside. There's the story here, and I want to know it. His command made you uncomfortable, as all commands did, but he hid it well, and he could empathise with Benjamin's wariness. The man was just trying to protect his. The man was just protecting his own family, like Ewan had once tried to do. Fair enough, he said. It started on takeover day, obviously. More than 30 of us ended up in the same building, and now it's the last place on earth we can call home. A load of us came from the same school, us four and a bunch of others. Which school was that? Asked Patrick. Oakenfold, over in Harpenden. That's rather far from Croydon. Private school or comprehensive? A short silence. Who's going to say it first? A special school, said Charlie. And it was awesome. Oh, that's interesting. Ewan watched the Rowlands' faces. Even in New London, the reactions were identical to the old days, and Ewan had not missed them one bit. Expressions of silent concern, attempts to look at each other for ideas on the most apologetic way to respond, sympathetic smiles of pity. Ewan had 100 sarcastic answers to choose from, but he kept silent. This family had let them into their home after all. You were telling us your story? Asked Benjamin. Yeah, Ewan continued. We're the underdogs of Spitfire's rise. Ewan detailed the history of Dr. McCormick and his band of countryside rebels to an audience who had not imagined a resistance 1 hour earlier. He had to leave out everything Nicholas Grant didn't already know, the location of Spitfire's rise, any details about their route to New London, how much his father had stolen from the barracks, not least the thermal blackout technology that had kept their location hidden for so long. But he surprised himself with the mood and atmosphere he could produce with so many missing pieces. With harsh detail but warm affection, he told the story of the 32 free men, women, and children, 33 including Shannon, but he kept her secret too, who survived the macabre horror of Takeover Day, sheltered under one roof, and decided to become more than survivors. He told the Rowlands how the original plan was to strike a couple of blows at Grant and give the world's most invulnerable dictator a nice middle finger before they were found and slaughtered. But they had evolved from runaways to survivors, from survivors to underdogs, and vowed one day to become liberators. The more Ewan told the story, the more he enjoyed it. He realised how much he loved the idea of a load of special ed teens forming a miniature army that might one day set a nation free. Before the end, he found Charlie and Jack hanging on his every word. Kate, however, had stood herself in the doorway, visibly upset and fiddling her nerves away with the rucksack straps. It surprised him how little the Rowlands knew about their own captivity. They told him the rumours that had been rampant in the weeks after Takeover Day, that Britain's own armed forces had got tired of both wars and taken the public hostage. Oh yeah, Britain was fighting 2 wars at the start of Takeover Day. Really, not very much detail is given about that, but they enabled Marshal Pierce's private army to gain as much control as they did. Or there was a disease sprouting in the countryside and the population had to be quarantined. Or the Americans had marched in and taken control before Grant made the country too powerful, and so on. They had never heard of Oliver Roth and gave no reaction when Ewan told them that Keith Tyler was dead. They hadn't even known the uniformed soldiers weren't human. Clone technology was still nothing more than science fiction to them. When he finished, Ewan gave the family a moment to collect themselves. It must have been a hell of a lot to learn all at once. Anyway, he said after the silence had lingered long enough, I'm guessing your architect's been looking at the walls? That was the first thing I did, said Aidan with a sigh. Well, after the first week was over and the crowd stopped flooding against them, they seemed to think if they pushed hard enough they'd fall over or something. But it's concrete. I'm guessing reinforced. Which begs the other obvious question. How we got in? Asked Jack. Yeah. How on earth did you manage that? Wasn't a bloody achievement, said Charlie. A laser cannon, Ewan answered. One of Grant's big ugly weapons. But even if he had one down here, you'd still have to climb. We were on the lowest floor when we got in here, and we still dropped down. This place is like a basement without stairs. Ewan hit his fist against their floor, and Benjamin snarled in frustration. Their older and more pragmatic parents nodded their heads in acceptance. But trust me, said Ewan, we didn't break in here just to grow old and die. I like your optimism, answered Patrick, but I wouldn't waste too much energy on hope. We've had about 2 years to search for an exit and found nothing. If 11 months, interrupted Charlie, not 2 years. Patrick's eyes widened, as did his wife and children's, as if their guests had just granted them an extra year of life, but their expressions were confused rather than happy. Are you serious? Asked Ruth. Only 11 months? Yeah, it's April 25th, said Charlie. 3 days from my birthday, if anyone cares. And I like our optimism too, especially since it's backed up with weapons. So don't write us off just yet. Speaking of which, said Benjamin, I should warn you, a lot of people will be interested in that big gun. Better keep it close or keep it hidden. I mean it. Ewan's eyes shot towards the far corner of the house. The minigun they had wrenched from the podcopter would be the most powerful authority tool in the inner city. It lay in plain sight in an unsecured building, and Ewan's experience with unreasonable people told him that anyone who really, really wanted something could find a way to get it. He glanced at the entrance, expecting to see Kate on guard. When his eyesight landed on the empty doorway, he let out a gasp. Just like that, Kate was missing. End of chapter 15.
Well, it's still a cliffhanger. I thought this would give some closure. Turn the other way around.
You'll get some closure at the end of chapter 28, I think.
I was every chapter that we read through, there are certain things that you capture, and they apply to like the real life so spot on. Like the reaction they had when they told even told them that they are from. Charlie told them actually that it's a special ed school, and it was, I don't know if it's this, if it's still the same in UK, but even here in the US, and especially back in the country where I'm from, special school is kind of like looked upon exactly like that, the way you've described in the book. So that and that's kind of like it's this is taking place way back in time, right? It's not
Mm.
like, it's kind of like right now today. So it's just kind of worrisome that we're still in that phase where
Mm.
we haven't educated ourselves enough. But anywho, tell us
Yeah,
about
I'm thinking that. I'm sorry, I was about to say I'm thinking that the best way past that is to do basically exactly what Charlie did, and just talk very openly about, oh yeah, special ed. That's where I was. It was awesome. And the more we talk about it as if it's a normal thing, the more people will realise that yes, it is in fact a normal thing.
yeah, I completely agree with that. I completely agree with that. It's easier doing that here in cultures like in Western cultures. In Eastern cultures, it's very challenging though. Things are
Mm.
getting better. There's more awareness, more education, but it's just kind of like almost as if people refrain from getting a proper diagnosis or getting diagnosed per se to kind of like stay away from the labels of the diagnosis, which is such a wrong. Um,
Mm.
I mean, I'm not gonna say. I mean, everybody has their own situations and all of that, but I feel like all of these things add up to the stigma that is associated with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and
Mm.
it makes things worse. But yeah, Rofe is pretty much upset about the cliffhanger as well, Chris. So every
I'd
every
like to say sorry, but I'm not massively sorry.
is every chapter going to have a cliffhanger at the end?
Um, Let me check, see what chapter 16 ends with, and what chapter 17 ends with. Well, I would tell you, but Steph doesn't want spoilers.
No, I don't want spoilers as well. I enjoy our session, so I will keep the book away in the drawer until we get back here next month. This break was
Mm.
longer than the other sessions, so I hope that we
Oh
can
yeah.
get back to track. Okay, so do you want to tell us about Oscar now, Oscar Smith?
Yes. So, uh, some time ago, I got a nice email from someone at HarperCollins, or at least the division of HarperCollins Publishing that puts children's books in schools, inviting me to submit a book proposal for a story with a autistic main character. And having spent a good weekend thinking, okay, what kind of story could I write? I ended up coming up with the most obvious obvious solution possible. A story about an 11-year-old autistic lad who rediscovers his confidence through solving Rubik's cubes, like attending competitions and things. So the working title we have right now is Oscar Smith Speed Cuber. It used to be called Oscar Smith Cubing Genius, but we're having a rethink about the title. It'll probably have another different title by the time it's published because that's how publishing books works. But again, it's going rather well, and I don't think I'm allowed to say whether a certain charity over here, um, well, a fairly national, large-scale group of people working on autism advocacy over here, reviewed the book and basically as sensitivity readers, and basically came back to the publisher saying, "Well, actually, I don't think there's anything we could possibly say to improve the autistic representation in this." Like, yes. So it's
I was
yeah,
gonna.
that's coming out in September, I believe. So
Is there kind of
yeah,
like a pre-order link or any?
not yet. I mean, we're still producing the book. I mean, uh, the text has been finalised, but now and never had this done before. I'm now waiting for the illustrator to finish. I'm going to see my own characters actually illustrated in a book, and it's just magical.
Whoa, that's cool. Okay, well, Steph says it's not based on you at all. At all is cute.
Well, I was in my 20s when I discovered how to solve a cube, but I when I say it's drawn from personal experience, it's not necessarily my personal experience. I'm just very aware of how much good cubing can do for people, including perhaps especially autistic young people looking for that sense of belonging and for opportunities to play to their strengths.
I've never tried cubing, but my son loves to cube, so
There
I'll
is an
definitely
absolute beginner's video on my YouTube channel if you're interested.
I'll try. I'll try, but I don't think I'm gonna be good at it, but I'm gonna try. I
No one's good at stuff when they start things.
Okay, Rufus says that he hopes books like Underdogs opens people's eyes, and he wishes he could make it a film. Rofe has his own multimedia company. If I'm right, Rofe, am I phrasing it right? So who knows? I
That's
mean, you guys
awesome.
can get in touch and see if you guys can work something out.
Mhm.
He's amazing at what he does too. So, that being said, Chris, is
Really.
there kind of like a pre-order link or anything at all for to get updates about the Oscar Smith book as well?
I'm afraid there isn't anything right now.
Okay.
Uh, I don't think HarperCollins are going to make anything available until they have. Well, frankly, if it were me promoting the book, I wouldn't do anything until I had pictures, like illustrations, or an example cover or something. Because it's an illustrated children's book, really, they've got to wait for that. But there will be plenty more of these sessions, so you can keep asking me every month if there's something, and one day the answer will be yes.
Oh, I will. And I would just like to highlight Chris is here. And Chris, I'm saying that without warning. So if you change your mind, let me know. But I did talk to Chris in one of the earlier sessions. After we wind up our live session, me and Chris, we talked about a few minutes. And I did talk to him about a possibility of having him do a workshop for kids on writing skills and authoring a book and all of that good stuff. And I have started working on the operational aspect of that. Um, but if you know of anyone here, Chris, if are you still up for it, right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yay. So, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a form for everyone who's watching and for all of our followers to kind of like fill in the details and so that we have an idea about the number of participants that we would have. And this would be by the end of the year because we have a couple of programs lined up already. So it would be by the end of the year, but this is something to look forward to. And we'll keep bugging Chris about updates on his books in our upcoming sessions. And I'm glad the chapter 17 is not going to be a cliffhanger, but we're going to do chapter 18 after that. So I'm not promising, and I don't think Chris can make any promises as well. So, all right, I think that's about it. And it's time, Chris. Do you want to say any parting words or anything like that?
So what I usually say, united by differences, everyone.
Oh my goodness, I love that. Okay. All right, take care, everyone. We're ending the broadcast
Right.
now. Bye.
Bye bye.